Despite military losses, the Russian president is trying to maintain control over 4 territories that Ukraine has annexed. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, has imposed martial law in Ukrainian districts that Moscow claims to have annexed last month, but is now having trouble defending against the counteroffensive. In statements made to members of his Security Council on television on Wednesday, Putin said that the new policies were intended to increase the security authority of each regional governor in Russia to support a special military operation. The proclamation is Putin's most recent escalation in response to a string of serious battlefield losses since the beginning of September. The martial law readiness levels established by Putin's edict differ both within Russia and in the Russian-occupied regions of Ukraine. The Russian-occupied Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk areas range from basic throughout the entirety of Russia to maximum. The directive establishes territorial defense centers with undefined responsibilities and extends broad emergency powers to Russian-installed governors in the 4 zones of greatest preparedness to meet the needs of Russia's armed forces. Officials can also impose curfews to keep people inside their houses and restrict travel. Under mounting pressure from a Ukrainian counteroffensive, Russian-appointed authorities in Kherson already declared a 7-day restriction on civilian entry. State-run news service TASS reported that Vladimir Saldo, the leader of the Russian-installed government, had said on Wednesday that even a curfew was not necessary before announcing that he was turning over power to the military. Saldo has issued an evacuation order across the Dnieper River just before Putin's declaration, directing people to migrate in any area of Russia and announcing that the Russian government would offer housing vouchers. The evacuation was referred to be propaganda by Ukraine. Additionally, the directive gives governments the power to temporarily resettle citizens under duress. While the U.S. assessed in September that Russia may have forcefully expelled between 900,000 and 1.6 million Ukrainians, Ukraine has blamed Russia for doing so. Additionally, the imposition of martial law in Russia always results in the total or partial mobilization of military forces. It is still being determined if more men will be called up because a partial mobilization has already started in Russia and spread to the occupied regions. Additionally, the decree mandates unnamed mobilization efforts in the economic arena. According to an assessment through the Washington-based Institute for the Study of War, this is likely to give Putin's recruitment of at least 300,000 Russian men industrial and economic support. The ISW described Putin's announcement as primarily legal theater aimed to legitimize acts the Russian military has to engage in, or is currently engaging in, while setting a structure for future mobilization and domestic limitations. In a statement, these actions are likely required to fulfill basic military requirements, the report continued, such as feeding, housing, equipping and transporting mobilized and conscripted troops to the front lines, compelling defense contractors or other private businesses to align with government production requirements, and more easily controlling both the Russian population and the Ukrainian civilian populations in Russian-occupied parts of Ukraine. Putin claimed that the action was in retaliation for the Ukrainian government's refusal to recognize the outcomes of a vote held by the people in the 4 seized territories last month. The so-called referendums have been denounced as a sham by Ukraine and its friends in the West, who reject their legality. The declaration of martial law is the most recent in a sequence of escalating actions taken by Russia in response to its significant battlefield losses on the southern and eastern fronts. The governor of the southern Ukrainian region of Mykolaiv, Vitaly Kim, stated that he thought Putin's decision was made to allow Russia to mobilize our people who have remained in an occupied area. A violation of the Geneva Conventions on Conduct in Conflict is when civilians are forced to join the armed forces of an occupying state. The funder of the private military firm Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, reportedly declared on Wednesday that he had assigned senior Wagner commander Andrei Bogatov the task of creating a people's militia. Wagner has adopted an increasingly public image in Ukraine. In recent years, Wagner was an underground network of mercenaries that provided warriors for hire in Syria, Mali, and the Central African Republic. Through a network of front firms, the group is purportedly funded and overseen by Prigozhin, a Russian businessman dubbed Putin's chef for his numerous catering contracts. Mikhailo Podolyak, a presidential advisor for Ukraine, claimed on Twitter that martial law does not change anything for Ukrainian soldiers. We keep on liberating and removing occupants from our territories. The former chairman of the Kherson region's aide, Sergei Klan, claimed that Putin's goal was to create a kind of panic to Kherson and an image to fuel propaganda. Moscow's action was criticized as criminal by Alexei Danilov, Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council. To alter the ethnic makeup of the occupied land, Danilov claimed that Putin's declaration of martial law in the Ukrainian regions that he has annexed is a prelude to the wholesale deportation of Ukrainians to underdeveloped regions of Russia. Earlier, the U.S. State Department claimed that Russia was using desperate measures to hold on to the annexation-affected areas. Russia's use of desperate measures to impose authority in these areas should not come as a surprise to anyone, State Department Deputy Spokeswoman Vedant Patel said at a regular press briefing. In response to concerns about a Ukrainian counteroffensive, Moscow-backed self-appointed officials in the southern Ukrainian area of Kherson have started relocating citizens to Russia. Numerous people have claimed to have received mass texts informing people that buses would start departing the port and warning people that the city would be shelled. The head of the Ukrainian president's staff, Andriy Yermak, referred to the Russian announcements as a propaganda show because Kyiv said the population transfers amounted to deportations. According to British intelligence, Russia's recent acknowledgement that a difficult situation has evolved in the Kherson region is highly unusual and suggests that the government may be considering a significant pullback of its forces from the territory west of the Dnipro River. In reaction to Russia's attacks on its energy infrastructure, Ukraine will start limiting the amount of electricity distributed throughout the nation. Kirilo Timoshenko, the deputy director of the president's office, advised Ukrainians to conserve electricity and get ready for rolling blackouts. The governor of the area stated on Thursday that damage from a Russian airstrike that struck a significant thermal power facility in the city of Burstin in western Ukraine had been very bad. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz stated that Russian President Vladimir Putin had been using hunger and power as weapons, yet he had failed to divide the West and would not succeed in his war objectives by pursuing a scorched earth policy. We will not let Moscow's latest escalation go unanswered. Scorched earth tactics will not help Russia win the war. They will only strengthen the unity and resolve of Ukraine and its partners, Scholz warned the German parliament. Before becoming full-fledged members of the alliance, if Russia or any opponent puts more pressure on Sweden or Finland, NATO allies will respond, according to Jens Stoltenberg, General Secretary of the alliance. Additionally, Putin commanded an economic mobilization in Sevastopol and Crimea, which Russia illegally acquired in 2014, and 6 provinces that border Ukraine. In televised comments, he declared that he was giving the regional governors of every Russian province more power to uphold law and order and enhance output in support of Moscow's war. The regulation also restricts people's ability to travel between the 8 provinces. According to the director of the European Commission, Russia's attacks on vital power infrastructure are acts of pure terror and constitute war crimes. Following Russian airstrikes that left hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians without electricity or water, Ursula von der Leyen spoke to the European Parliament. Zelensky asserted that 233 Shahed UAVs and several missiles were shot down during the month, leading to major success in bringing down Iranian drones. According to Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Kyiv, several Russian missiles were gunned dead above the city on Wednesday afternoon. According to diplomats from that nation, Nikos Dendias, the foreign minister of Greece, was compelled to take safety in a bomb bunker in Kyiv while visiting Ukraine. Analysis reveals that Ukraine will pay far more to shoot down kamikaze drones than Russia did to acquire and use the low-cost Iranian-made technology. Military analysts place the entire cost of Russia's unsuccessful drone assaults on Ukraine in the range of $11.66 and $17.9 million. The cost to Ukraine to shoot down the drones is estimated at more than $28.14 million. The business that makes the drones thought to have been used in Russia's attacks on Ukraine, and 3 senior Iranian military officers will be subject to penalties from the EU. The Guardian has seen the draft sanctions list, which is anticipated to be approved in the coming days, showing that EU ministers do not accept Iran's assertions that it gave Russia the deadly low-flying weapons. Russian Deputy UN Ambassador Dmitry Polyansky told journalists that if UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sends specialists to Ukraine to examine crashed drones that Ukraine and the West claim were produced in Iran, Russia will reevaluate its collaboration with Guterres and his staff. According to Downing Street, Putin will experience grave consequences if he used nuclear weapons in the conflict in Ukraine. Ben Wallace, the British defense minister, is in Washington for discussions with his American counterpart, amid concerns that the Russian president may launch a nuclear missile over the Black Sea. The European Parliament gave the yearly Sakharov Medal for Intellectual Freedom to the Ukrainian people in recognition of their resistance to Russian aggression.